My name is Jean Marie Herron. I'm a certified professional organizer and the business development manager for the Junk Luggers. My mission is to improve the quality of people's lives through the decluttering of their homes and offices in an eco-friendly and non-judgmental way. If you'd like to see more of these videos, simply click the subscribe button. So welcome everybody to this month's Posse's Pen, A Last Act of Love. Very apropos for the month of February. Happy you're all here. To go through just a couple of quick housekeeping items. We are being recorded, and I'm going to ask that you hold your questions until our Q&A portion, and you can write your questions in the chat box, and my assistant Deborah is here to man the chat box. Deborah will also be putting different links in the chat box as we move along in the presentation as well. So I'm not going to say that much about Eileen because she's going to take the whole show in just a minute. But what I will tell you is she's also a professional organizer, somebody I hold in very, very high regard. And she has a very special niche in the organizing world. And what I will tell you that the next time I lose a loved one, she will be the first person I call. So we're going to go through our presentation, and then next month on March 16th, we have Charity Madness, a sustainable and humanitarian slam dunk. So I'm going to come with all my wonderful charitable resources, and I ask that you come with all your charitable resources so that we can share and we can help each other when it comes to charity. Then we'll do the Q&A, and then we'll close right around 1 o'clock. And I would like to tell you that today's Posse's Pen and moving forward is being sponsored by the Junk Luggers. So I'm also the new business development manager for the Junk Luggers, and we are an eco-friendly furniture and junk removal company with very much a charitable and sustainable mindset. So that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Eileen. So go for it.
Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for this Posse's Pen. As you can see from the photo, I am a dog lover, something that Jean Marie and I share. I even have my dog sweater on today. You can see my little Scotty. No, I don't have one, but that will be for another Posse's Pen. So as Jean Marie said, I am in the professional organizing space, and my niche is in estates. So it's a very, very, very small niche. One of only a few people who focus solely on that in the country. My background is in law enforcement. I worked criminal investigations with the federal government for 2 decades, and I still do so part-time for my local district attorney's office. But I got into this field following the death in a car accident of both my parents. So it was a simultaneous and sudden, completely unexpected death. And it kind of changes your life. And so eventually I did leave my full-time job and I opened Legacy Estate Organizing. And so my purpose is to help executors resolve the financial aspects of their loved ones' estates. So to work alongside the executor, go through the documentation and the clues in the home to help you find your deceased loved one's assets and to feel better about how you're serving them after their death. And so I wrote a book, After the Funeral, a practical memoir for administering your loved one's estate to take you through the first days and weeks following someone's death. It is purposefully short and necessarily light, not chapter 1, but after that it gets much lighter. But anyway,
it's wonderful. I'm just going to interject. It's wonderful. It's an easy read. It's an informative read, and everybody should have this book. And I remember once it came out, I gave it away that Christmas to all my clients. So go ahead, Eileen.
Because nothing says Merry Christmas like a book about death. But in this case, it's not a heavy one, and it is an easy read. So I'm an estate organizer. I'm a criminal and investigative analyst. I'm a writer. I'm a notary public in the state of New York and a dog lover. And my favorite quote is, "Nothing is automatic." And when I say that, it is because many people think that after someone dies, you'll get a lot of information. People will approach you, tell you about accounts or debts or things that your loved one owns. No one will. No one will come to you and tell you what to do next. You must take the first step. So you do need to be proactive, but my recommendation is to do it with love.
Oh, helps if I go down. There we go.
So we talk about love language, and we can love our loved ones in three ways. You know, while they're still with us, which is very important, following their death, and then always in our memories. And it does not dissipate. I can tell you, having lost my parents almost 10 years ago, love doesn't end with death. I love them no less today than I did 10 years ago. In fact, I may love them more, and I certainly appreciate them more. And when I worked to close their estates simultaneously, I made sure I did it from a perspective of love and respect, and that everything they had worked for during their lives shouldn't just be left haphazardly to chance. I did it well, carefully, and efficiently, which is why they selected me as executor. So when we talk about a person's legacy, we talk about a number of different things. But in order of importance, I'd like to say someone's legacy is sentimental first, then financial, then material. So that is in order of importance. That is not necessarily how you would treat the estate. I know many people do the material first, kind of put the sentimental off forever and never look at the financial. So please don't do that. You want to care for the assets they earned, the planning they took care of during their lives, and their intentions for their goods and for their memories. So when we talk about the sentimental, we talk about, you know, photos and letters, etc. You want to make sure you secure those in the home after your loved one dies away. The financial, obviously, you're going to look for the most valuable items, the checkbook, actual cash, jewelry, financial documents, and you're going to want to gather those all together. And then once you've done that, then you can focus on the items that remain in the home. I can't tell you how many times people do it in the wrong direction, and they worry about the soup spoon, and they completely miss the deeds to cars and homes. They miss evidence of life insurance policies. Some of the letters get thrown out without even being looked at. I say, look at everything, touch everything at least once, and then you can begin using a service such as junk lovers to remove. I said junk lovers. That's a great one. I like that. Junk lovers.
Junk lovers, junk lovers, junk huggers.
Junk huggers, to remove the items that no one in the family wants, or that you're not going to sell. So I don't know if you want to jump in here, Jean Marie.
Yeah, I do. So when you use the word, you know, the family spoon or the wooden spoon, it made me think of a particular family that I worked with. They had 6 children, and everybody wanted the wooden spoon because everybody remembered the wooden spoon as a child. So that's the kind of tricky stuff that, comes into play. And just like I tell couples, I'm not a marriage counselor when I work with them. I tell families, I'm also not a family counselor. But I do want to speak to bullet number 3 because in my 16 years as a professional organizer, I've done a number of estates. But now that I'm in my role with junk luggers, we do estates every day. So I see this on a really large scale. And, you know, I've only been there a couple weeks as of this week, but I will tell you that if everybody can get on board with the decision making in a whole home situation, in an estate situation, if you were to hire a company like ours, you could literally get all the donating, all the recycling, and all the junking out in a very quick and efficient, less stressful, and less expensive in the long run way when you hire a company like ours, because it's done in a matter of hours as opposed to it taking, you know, weeks, if not months. And when we work with real estate agents, which we do all the time, we could also, during that time, move the furniture around for staging. And if it's at a closing, we could even leave it in broom swept condition. So, you know, I know this is, you know, a little plug for junk luggers, but I'm saying this, you know, as an educated professional organizer, it can be done quickly and professionally if the family's all on board and the decisions are done. So it's a great way to do it.
That is true. That is true. And as I'll use my mother's immortal words, years before they passed away, she said, "And when we die, I don't want you guys fighting over anything. Everything's going to be fair. Everything's going to be even. And if you fight, I will haunt you forever." So these are wonderful parting words from my mother. And it worked, because when my parents died, again, we had no warning. we knew what our roles were, and we did not fight, which is miraculous and beautiful. So I recommend that for everyone. So we have a very short period of time here, so I'm going to rip through some material pretty quickly, but then we do have questions and answers. So I just want to establish a baseline of estate information, and this is not for you to respond to me. This is sort of a general knowledge for all of you participating, and some of you will know the answers to all of these because you've been involved with an estate. Some of you will have no idea. So let's just run through, and you can just write down on a little sheet of paper the answers to these questions in case you want to test your own knowledge. So the first one, the question is, which takes precedence after someone passes away? The provisions of the will or the named beneficiary on each account? I'll wait 5 seconds before answering. I see a couple conferring on the screen. Excellent. So the answer is the named beneficiary on each account. And that is for those accounts that have them. Usually life insurance policies, always, often IRAs. The named person takes precedence over the stipulations in the will. The will take over where there is no named beneficiary. This is also a plug right now. If you have a chance, particularly for your larger assets, always have a primary beneficiary and then a contingent, because in my parents' case, they died together. So the primary beneficiary, the spouse, also was killed at the same time. So a contingent will allow for those rare but unfortunate situations where you lose more than one person at a moment's notice. So let's go to number 2. In most states, who is first in order of inheritance, the spouse or the children? And there's always exceptions. Oh, I love the song, Jean-Marie. There's always exceptions, but the spouse, the legally married spouse, takes precedence over the children. There are some exceptions where an asset may be split between, and that's generally not true in our area. All right, number 3, in lieu of a spouse or children, if someone dies without a spouse or a living child, who has precedence? The deceased parents or their siblings? All right, and the answer is the parents. It goes first to the spouse, then to the living children, then to the parents, and in absence of those, to the siblings. And that would include naturally born and adopted siblings. The law doesn't distinguish between adoptees and those naturally born. All right, number 4. Who has the authority to act on someone's behalf while the person is alive? Someone who holds power of attorney or the executor? This one should be easier for many people. It is the power of attorney. Very good, Helena. The power of attorney is responsible while the person is alive. Many people may not know that the power of attorney loses that authority at the moment of death. So the power of attorney is not necessarily the person taking care of the estate. You can name the same person. Sometimes it's nice because they're already aware of your financial holdings, but it doesn't have to be. Number 5, which asset is distributed outright to the beneficiary or beneficiaries following someone's death? An IRA or life insurance? In this case, the answer is life insurance. Life insurance is actually a wonderful gift, and I do not receive a commission for this. I'm just telling you from past experience when my parents passed away. Life insurance does not pass through the estate. It is not taxed, and it goes directly to the named beneficiaries on the account. It is very helpful if you don't have direct access to your loved one's bank account yet, and you need to pay for things like the funeral or a double funeral in my case. The IRA actually has to be converted. Say the IRA is in my case, your father's name. It goes into, it has to be converted to the estate of, and then it's distributed to the beneficiaries as designated on the policy. In our case, it was distributed 3 ways, directly to inherited IRAs, to myself, my brother, and my sister. And you should know that there has been a change in the law. We were grandfathered. We are allowed to withdraw the required minimum distribution from the IRA every year until we die. Now, people who are inheriting an IRA, not the spouse, but other heirs, will have to spend down that IRA within 10 years, which has some interesting tax complications. So just be aware of that. And our last question is, which must be filed for the year in which someone dies? An individual tax return or an estate tax return? I see the conference going on again between the couple. In this case, it's both. You have to file, again, except for those who are in very low income, in which case an individual tax return doesn't need to be filed. But for most of us, particularly anybody who owns a home or other assets, you will file, the executor will file an individual tax return for the year in which the person dies. And then for every year that the estate is open, even though there may not be any estate tax bill, if your assets are below the millions, whatever it is in each state now, you still would have to file. And this is where an attorney or a CPA can be very helpful. So depending on how you scored, hopefully this did expand your knowledge a little bit of who is responsible, who's going to act, and it might also affect your own estate planning. You may make slightly different decisions knowing the answers to these questions.
I have to go back to the Eileen Moynihan school.
And so one of the things, and I speak of this as someone, an investigator, you want to be your loved one's Sherlock Holmes. If you're lucky, the person died having a chance to speak to you, to express their wishes, to tell you where everything is, to tell you how they want it handled. In the case of a sudden death, you don't always have that opportunity. So you have to do a little sniffing, a little digging to try to find what your loved one had and maybe what they wanted. If you're lucky, you'll find a spreadsheet and you'll find a letter designating how they want items distributed. You also will hopefully find the will or the name of the law firm that is holding the will. And you want to find as much evidence as possible. And this is why I say touch every document in your loved one's house. Open every piece of mail. Look at every document at least once. Many of them will have no application to any of the things we talked about, sentimental, financial, or material, but many of them will. So some of the really juicy things you can find in your loved one's home is last year's tax return. If they owned an asset last year, they probably own the asset this year. You also want to keep an eye out, particularly right now, for 1099s that come in the mail. Those babies are golden, particularly when someone does a lot of their work online and the only statement they get is at the end of the year from Social Security, from their banks, from their investment companies. So those tiny little 1099 cards are great. I worked on an estate where the two parents died within a short period of each other. They were very computer savvy, despite being in their late 70s. And we didn't know about some of the assets. The daughter and I didn't know. And then at the end of the year, this tiny little postcard, actually a couple of them came indicating CDs numbering almost $100,000, entirely processed online. We wouldn't have known if we hadn't seen those cards. So thank goodness for that. You can also look, you can see my father's old check registers here. He had them going back to the 1960s. You will know everything your loved one bought, paid for, if they had subscribed to something, if they gave to charities. It is a gold mine of information about your loved one's values. You can also look around the desk and see if they have sticky notes, if there's a notebook, if there's anything under the blotter. If you can break into their email, into their computer, even better. I use the example on the right-hand side. My mother was very into the computer in her later years. She had a notebook. She did word games, Sudoku. She took little notes as she was going to websites. And as I was going through her notebook, I noticed this one page. It mentions treasury notes, the names of a number of banks, and interest rates that we haven't seen in years. And it turns out that my mother had been laddering CDs and doing it entirely online. And so with these names, you can see Summit Bank, Penn Fed, Hudson, and then the percentages. I knew that some or all of these were holding assets in my mother's name. So it was a simple letter. I used a form letter and just customized it and said, I understand, I'm the executrix. I have the authority to execute my mother's estate. And I would like to know, are you holding anything? And 3 of them had CDs for her. So we were able to claim that, add that to the estate, and eventually distribute it among my brother and sister and myself. So these tiny clues really do add up.
Thanks, Eileen. On the front cover of Eileen's book is an image of a file box. And if you ever find yourself in this situation where all of a sudden you're in your loved one's home and they're gone and papers abound, what you can do is buy an inexpensive file box, whether it's a banker's box that's cardboard or a plastic file box from Staples. Go and buy yourself a box of hanging file folders and grab yourself some Post-its, and then just start making a file for each category of paper. Take an upside down Post-it, write the name of that category, like, bank statements, credit cards, CDs, and that'll really start to help you formulate the organization of the paper.
That is absolutely true. So I know this is a lot of information, and many people at this point would be asking, well, won't the estate attorney do that? Yes, and I highly respect estate attorneys. I work with a number of them, and the one we had from my parents was excellent. He is the one who said you can save a lot in legal fees by doing much of the administrative work yourself. Golden words. It did save us thousands of dollars on my parents' estate. And of course, that's what got me here today and why I'm speaking to you. So the most important thing you take out of this, you do have to be proactive. Sitting in your house, I know it's very hard after someone dies, and you don't have to do it in the first week or month, but do not ignore the estate. The weight of your grief combined with the guilt for not handling their belongings intensifies the grief. So my approach is be active about it, work for them, even following their death. So you want to remember a number of things. The most important is if your loved one did not live with you, forward their mail to you so that you see everything they get and you open and act on everything they get. Much of it will be junk, some of it won't, and you might be surprised at some of the things they owned. You also want to review every document you find in the house, touch it at least once, and then if you find it's irrelevant, you can shred it, but at least look at it. Don't assume that it's meaningless. You do want to preserve vital documents. So if you find anybody's death certificate, marriage certificate, birth certificate, and to include deeds, etc., even if you think the asset's no longer held, even if you believe your grandparents didn't own anything, those things are very important, particularly if you're claiming lost assets. And that is true of assets that have moved from one generation to the next. Instead of trying to, go to the county's office or apply online through Vital Check. If you have the documents already, hold on to them. They don't take up much space. A single death certificate is not going to fill up your file cabinet. And you also want to check for lost assets every year. And as you may or may not know, every state has a treasury, and every treasury receives lost assets or unclaimed property from companies that can't find the person or frankly don't make much of an effort. And like New York's, for example, is enormous. It's like $6 billion of unclaimed money. New Jersey's is quite high as well. There is a website, missingmoney.com, which aggregates lost assets for 39 states and Puerto Rico. New Jersey, unfortunately, dropped out during the pandemic. So you'll have to go individually to New Jersey's site to search for your name. But you can search any state treasuries just by Googling unclaimed property, the state name, and making sure you pick the .gov, G-O-V site that corresponds. You want to make sure you go to a proper government website. So missingmoney.com to check 39 states, and then you can go individually to New Jersey. New Jersey is one of 11 states that doesn't participate. And in our area, of course, we're surrounded. New Jersey doesn't participate, Connecticut doesn't, Pennsylvania doesn't. The others are pretty much all out west. I expect New York will eventually drop off, but as of today, they are still on. And it's a free way to check. Just check the last name. You don't need a social security number. You just do need to know where your loved one lived. And you can start the claim online in most cases. So that is missingmoney.com or the specific state's treasury.
Excellent. All right, so that's a very nice short list for everybody to remember. We're going to pop out to Q&A in just a second and take all your questions. In the meantime, I want to make sure you have Eileen's contact information. Pretty easy to remember, legacyestateorganizing.com. Eileen at legacyestateorganizing.com. And I don't know how she got this phone number. It had to be from her detective days, 845-200-3500. Boy, I wish we all could have a phone number like that. That's pretty good. It's how to find me these days. So I'm doing one-on-one work with Posse on just the weekends, and I'm with junk luggers all week long. And Deb can put our contact information in the chat box for you. And now we're going back to the Brady Bunch, and feel free to unmute yourself and ask away. Don't be shy. I know I'm not the only one who failed the quiz.
Hi, it's Mary Lynn. Can you hear me?
Yes, Mary Lynn. Hi.
Okay. I have to go off at 1 o'clock, but I just have the question: what legally holds up the listing, the house for sale? I'm in a situation now, and I just wonder what legally has to hold. Are there certain, if the kids all live out of state, or can the house be listed?
So a realtor should really only sign a listing contract with the person who has legal authority over the estate if the house is in the estate name. For example, I was the named executrix in my parents' will. That alone is not enough. I went to surrogate court at the time. My parents were living in Morris County. I went to the surrogate court in Morristown, and I got a document, a letter testamentary, to indicate to banks and to investment companies, to realtors, to home repair people, that I am the legal authority to make decisions on the sale and renovation, etc., of a home. My brother and sister had no say. Had they filed a lawsuit, could that have held it up? Yes. Very wisely, they did not, because I did all the work. So you want to make sure you are dealing with the authorized individual. If there's a mess, you really do need a signed contract.
How do we do, Mary Lynn? Was that okay?
There's a what? You need a signed contract?
So in other words, the home is in a name. It's either going to be in the estate of the deceased person, it's going to be in a trust, etc. But a person, or sometimes two people, sometimes a co-executor or a co-trustee, has authority to make decisions about an estate. The house is usually the largest asset, and you want to make sure that you are working with the person who has that authority. Do they have a letter testamentary or a letter of administration for the estate or the trust? Are they the licensed trustee? You're not just signing it with anyone. It has to be the person who has the authority to sell.
All right. Thank you, Eileen. And I'm seeing some items in the chat box. So I think Deb already did it. So Eileen's contact information is in the chat box. And if you just go to her website, you can purchase the book either through there or on Amazon, right, Eileen?
That's right.
Okay.
And you can choose, if you don't want to read, you can listen to me narrate as an audiobook. So that's fun.
And you folks don't have an opportunity here this quickly to get to really know Eileen's personality, but she's actually hysterical. So if you ever want to, I'm not sure if she's still into craft beer. That was in some of her newsletters. Oh, yeah. I'm sure a craft beer and a night out, it would be quite entertaining. All right, other questions? We've got just about another minute or so.
And believe me, I am happy to answer anything. I have heard the most unusual questions you can imagine. Some of them are not in my field, some of them are, but I'm always amazed at some of the things people come up with.
Eileen, what can we do for our children, the few things to be prepared for our own deaths? Obviously a will, having a tracking spreadsheet of all the passwords, everything written out so that they know. Is there anything else that I'm missing that is extremely helpful?
The most important thing is to do what my parents did, express your wishes while you're alive. If you are intending to divide everything equally, tell them that. If you are planning to give more to a child in a less affluent career, if you have paid for the education of one and not the other, and you intend to divide the assets differently, let them know in advance. Don't let them be surprised when they're in the attorney's office and they go, what? You want to make sure you're consistent with your messaging to all your kids so that there is no surprise, no matter how you die. And also, if you have minor children, please make sure you have the legal documents in place. not an issue for a number of us, but for those who do, please make sure you have that set up. And tell the person, if you're planning to give guardianship, let them know ahead of time.
My will needs to be updated. We still had minor children when we wrote it, so my sisters were executor. Is it better to have a sibling or a child when your children are now all adults? And it's probably a personality question, not a general question.
I agree. It's very much a personality question. My brother and sister are absolutely intelligent, but when it came to selecting an executor, who is the nerdiest? And that was clearly me, clear by a long shot. First of all, I'm an investigator. Second of all, I'm a list maker. And they knew I would do a good job. My brother and sister were all for it. My brother coincidentally had the job, had it come up to pull the plug. If someone had been on life support, which is interesting. My parents thought he was tougher. I don't know if that's true, but it never became an issue. So you know your children better than anyone else. You can pick a sibling if you know them well. Try not to pick someone tremendously older than you, because chances are they're gone. Or name a secondary in case that person is.
Thank you.
I just wanted to chime in on this one too. The conversation being open and candid and forthright with your parents or your loved ones is of extreme importance. I'm just going to talk real quickly about my mother and my grandmother. My mother, who is still alive, will not talk at all. It's as if she's never going to die. She will not speak to the subject at all. And I know that I'm going to end up with a mess on my hands. So it's a good thing I'm the nerdy one and the list keeper. With my grandmother, who lived till she was 92, it was an absolute blessing because my grandmother was very organized. She even had a pre-planned funeral. And since I was close to my grandmother, I lived 20 minutes away. I had downsized her twice myself. I knew where everything was. I knew exactly, what she wanted. And, when all 12 of us were surrounding her hospital bed at Valley Hospital, when she did pass, I knew exactly what to do the moment she passed, because it was really all done and it was done to her wishes. And what a godsend having that.
And I'd like to second that, Jean Marie, because, my parents, we didn't, there was no announcement they were going to die. It was simply 2 police officers showing up at my house. But because my parents had given us a very outright information as well as clues throughout the years, we had an idea what to do. They told us that they had already purchased mausoleum slots. If you have, tell someone so that they know in those 3 days, or 1 day if you're Jewish, but 3 days, generally, if you're a Christian, to set up these arrangements. If you know they already have a plot, wonderful. If you already know that they've prepaid, wonderful. You don't want people scrambling in those 3 days. You want them to know. And that's one of the most important things. Keep those lines of communication all open. Yeah. Oh, and Jean Marie, don't forget, we're giving away one of my books. So.
Oh, we talked about this and I forgot. We're raffling it. Okay, so Deb, how many people are on the call?
I think 10 or 9 actually, because
okay, so
without the 3 of us.
Okay,
right.
So for the 9 of you who are left, I want you to pick a number between 1 and 9, and Eileen's going to think of a number and then put it in the chat box. Put your number in the chat box, please. So pick a number between 1 and 9, and the person who is closest to the number or on her number will win her book, and we'll have to get your contact information. All right, so we're going back to
I already have my number. I picked it out in advance.
Okay, so Eileen's got a number in her head. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Are we missing 2 people? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, 2 people still need to enter the raffle if you want to win Eileen's book.
Should I put Anders? So Anders is his individual?
Yes, you can. All right.
While we're waiting, can I ask a question or should I wait until after?
Go ahead, Helena.
So Eileen, what kind of advice would you give to someone in a relationship that, without marriage? Is anything and I understand you need to have a will and all that stuff and a power of attorney. Is there anything else specific that you would recommend for that situation?
Absolutely. If you're not legally married, you do need to set up. Nothing will be automatically belonging to your partner if you're not legally married. So attorneys can do this fairly easily, but it has to be defined. The house, they may recommend the house be in both names. You want to clearly declare what assets go to the person. You want to change your beneficiaries to make sure that if you want your IRA or you want your life insurance to go to your life partner and not blood relatives, you need to define that. So that is something you really want to look at, over the next year or so, because the law doesn't recognize emotional attachments. It recognizes legal and biological ones.
Right. I'm in a different state too. I'm not in New Jersey anymore, but I'll work with a state attorney here to do that.
And then those beneficiary designations are very important because they do take precedence.
Yes, I understand that. Thank you.
I always tell divorced people, do you really want your ex on there? You probably want to check that.
We have a terrible situation in my family. My father had a cemetery plot for two people. For himself, he was already there. He passed when I was 19. And his wife, he was divorced from my mom and remarried my wonderful stepmother named Debbie. And my dad passed, and years and years and years and years and years went by, and Debbie never redid her will. And she was with a partner named Mike out in California for probably 2 decades. Well, Debbie passed, and Debbie ended up, poor Mike, had to fly Debbie's body back out to New Jersey because she had originally said she wanted to be laid in the same plot with my dad. So it was terrible. We had to reopen up my father's grave. You can't make this stuff up. Yeah. So make sure your wills are updated. All right. With that note, Eileen, the number you have in your head is?
Lucky number 7.
All right. Next month, March 16th, 12:30, same bat time, same bat channel. We have our charity slam dunk. I forget what I called it. Bottom line is I tried to tie it to March Madness, and now I can't remember what I said, but come with your charitable resources and we'll all share and we'll help the planet one lug at a time. Remember, if you want to see more videos on my organizing, productivity, and decluttering topics, hit the subscribe button and you'll be alerted when the next one is ready.